We have got to raise the amount of money we spend on defense. Um, we need to keep going on climate change. The population is getting older, um, and that means that life is difficult.
What do you think is the state of the British economy? There seems to be an awful lot of confusion as to whether things are set to get better or set to get worse.
Well, we're a small country in the middle of a rather turbulent period, which is going to, outside factors are likely to determine what happens to us. But I think we're, like most of Europe, in difficulties at the moment. We've got excessive debt, rather slow growth, concern about the possibility of outside tariffs hitting us or hitting the world more generally. And the future is, shall we say, uncertain.
So what options does that give the Chancellor when she makes her major statement on spending later this month? Is it simply a question of having to find cuts?
I think to a large extent, yes, and that's been foreshadowed in the press. I think that some of the welfare benefits for incapacity and inability to work have probably been too generous, and she's going to cut back on them. It's going to be a very fine line and difficult to draw between causing damage and upset to the weakest in the economy, and at the same time saving the macroeconomy from increasing difficulties. I wish her the very best of luck, and I hope that she has this, the abilities and the good fortune to choose the track successfully.
What would you say to the argument that some are making that actually, as you say, this is not the time to hurt some of the weakest people in the economy, and that instead uh, the government should be looking either to a wealth tax or to more borrowing?
Well, a wealth tax is a very inefficient way of going about things because the wealthy just flee. A much better alternative is a land value tax, which I've been arguing in favor of for a long time. But again, if you do that, you've got to introduce, as I hope that you will at some stage, you've got to introduce it very gently, because otherwise land values go down with a bang. And since a great deal of borrowing is collateralized on the basis of property values, you run into very quickly into a financial crisis, and you don't want to do that. So it's not, although it would be desirable to shift away from taxes on incomes and profits and all that towards taxes on assets such as land. You can't, this is not a solution to an immediate problem. It's a long-term change which is desirable and should be undertaken, but it won't solve the immediate problem that the Chancellor has.
Do you have any indications that those sort of long-term changes you're talking about are being considered?
I'm not in touch with people involved. I'm out of the loop. If I was in the loop, I probably wouldn't be able to talk to you anyhow. But being out of the loop, all I can say, I don't know. I hope.
What would be your assessment of Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor's husbandry of the economy? A lot of people saying that now she's having to rectify the consequences of problems which she created, notably, of course, with the increase in national insurance.
I think that it was an unfortunate choice and that it didn't help. But that said, we're in much the same straits as virtually the rest of Europe. Um, so I'm, we tend to be much too country oriented. And this is a problem that the uh, Western countries in Europe are now generally facing. I know almost all of them, not quite all, but most of them, and none of them have really found yet a good way of getting out of these problems. Um, uh, it's going to be a difficult future, and let's hope we can make it a bit better from now on.
Do you think there's any sort of hope for optimism based on the fact that clearly the situation is very unstable in America with the Trump administration and economic policies there? Some people saying that it's a moment of opportunity for Europe to be stable, but also to face up to the real changes it needs to make.
Uh, I don't know that optimism is the right word at a time when the defense umbrella that we thought that the US was given seems to be closing on us. And if we're to play a full role in future geopolitical conditions, we have got to raise the amount of money we spend on defense. Um, we need to keep going on climate change. The population is getting older. Um, and that means that life is difficult. We've got a lot of public sector expenditures that have to be done with an economy that is not growing very fast. And given the decline in the native working population, is probably not in future going to grow very fast either.
A shift, though, from welfare spending to defence spending could be a stimulus for growth, couldn't it?
Um, Maybe, but growth in the form of more tanks and more soldiers, it's not the kind of growth that actually encourages much in the way of ordinary people feeling better off.
But it's potentially employment. I mean, that's what's happening in Germany, for example. They are actually literally taking what were car plants and turning them into tank plants.
Yeah, but again, it doesn't improve your and my sort of welfare. Yes, but the we what we don't actually have is a serious unemployment problem. What we have is a problem whereby the number of people who claim that they can't work because of mental health and other problems has been rising really very sharply, and we have to deal with that somehow. And the health system is under strain. Making more people build more tanks doesn't reduce the waiting list at hospitals.
But equally, if the argument is that there are people who want to work or should be in work who are now receiving benefits, that raises a question as to whether there are the jobs for them to go to.
Um, if there were the jobs for them to go to, I think that one could expand more happily than at the moment seems to be the case.
So you don't feel that there are jobs for them to go to. So in
I,
that,
we could create jobs for them to go to if they joined the workforce.
such as what sort of jobs?
Jobs in services, nurses, carers, teachers, um, maybe producing other things that we need.
So that there is the option to do that, and if you created those jobs, would overall the nation's finances be any better?
Um, yes, I would hope so. With more people working, tax revenues would go up, fiscal situation would get better, and welfare would improve. People would have more income.
So it sounds as if you're making a fairly gloomy prognosis for the economy. If you were called into the Treasury to advise the Chancellor on what she should be doing or what she should change, what would you say?
I think that they have got to tighten up a bit on uh, the payouts for people who claim they have incapacity. Also, they got, I think, to try and ensure that people who claim incapacity are tested more frequently. And that goes back again to the question of improving the operations of the health service.